All right, cool. Hopefully that's going to work for us. Welcome people on the recording. Welcome to the Firewise Alba Road Q&A. So here's just a brief agenda so you have an idea of what to expect from the meeting. These first three items, the welcome intro and updates, are gonna be super quick. Then we're gonna spend the majority of the time with Chief, just asking questions. So we have some questions from community that were submitted in advance. If anyone on Zoom has questions, or if anyone in person has questions as well, we'll just manage the flow so that all three can be asked through this presentation. I'll also ask, just as like a Zoom housekeeping item, is if you are attending via Zoom, that you just have yourself muted during the presentation and just unmute. If you have a question or anything. We'll also be using the hand raise feature too, but of course you can always just holler if you need. That works too. So intros. So I wanted to intro the Firewise Counsel, and then also let Chief Stacy introduce herself too. My name is Lindsay Speth.
And I know. Are you gonna put your headphones on?
Whenever you get a chance, Anne, go ahead and mute yourself. All right, thanks. So I'm Lindsay. I live on Alba Road, and I'm working with the rest of these ladies to get Firewise recognition. I live within the retreat, so I'm about 1.5 miles up Alba. I didn't prep the rest of the council for this, but would other people like to introduce themselves? This is the list of all the ladies that are on the council, and I know some of them are on. I don't know, Kelly, do you want to start and do a brief intro? Should you take your silence as a not interested? Betty, are you on the call?
Yes, hi Lindsay, I'm on the call.
Hi, you want to do a little intro for yourself?
I'm Betty Solois. I live over on Sweetwater Lane, and Judy Sherman and I, who Judy's not here today, but we're pretty much representing the neighbors on our side of Alba. And I've lived up here, about 24 years now.
And then Diane, you want to give a quick intro too?
Sure. Is this working?
It's working.
Okay. I'm not a Zoom expert. I'm Diane. I live on Sunny Patch, but also manage the retreat center, the Sequoia side of it. And have been on the mountain for about 15 years and love it. And let's just keep it not burning.
And then Kelly, I'm coming back to you. Do you want to do an intro? You're muted though.
Sorry about that. Our space bar wasn't quite working like it should. My name is Kelly Blanchard. I live about 1.4 miles up on Alba. Been here for about 3 years. So new to the community, but very much involved. That's it.
Thank you. And then welcome, Chief. Thank you for joining us. You want to give us a quick intro too?
Yeah, Stacy Brownlee, Ben Lomond Fire Chief. I've been chief for probably now 12 years, but I've been on the department since 1984. So I've been here, I was born and raised here, so I'm very familiar with the terrain.
Awesome. Yay. Okay, let's see. Let me get back to my presentation. Okay, cool. So I wanted to just like quickly spend maybe 1 minute just talking a little bit about Firewise in case there are folks that aren't aware of what this is. So Firewise is a national recognition program that helps communities organize to reduce wildfire risks. It's run by an organization called the NFPA, and it is nationwide. So states across the country are going through the same thing that we are, especially the West Coast. So it's becoming more common. And as part of that, some of the perks that Firewise actually offers is insurance discounts. So just like for us, we just had our insurance canceled. And so we started looking for new insurance carriers. And State Farm actually started recognizing Firewise communities for discounts effective this month, I think, February 2022. So you can be eligible for insurance discounts by being a Firewise community. They're also starting to prioritize access to like services and supports from groups like, say, Santa Cruz County against Firewise communities. So trying to make sure that, you know, if communities are putting in the effort, wanting to make sure that they have access to different services that they provide, sometimes ahead of other communities. Just as part of us going through it, we're better connected and more prepared for not just wildfire, but also just any emergency that comes up. And obviously, there's a wide variety of emergencies that we've experienced in the last few years. And so I think that's a big perk. And then the obvious one is just having reduced wildfire risk overall for our community. And then of note, as part of that, wait, let me go into this. Okay, and then where we're at in the process. Sorry, this slide ended up a little bit weird. So this is sort of the general high level process of what it takes to become a Firewise community. So the first step is just having a council of neighbors who are kind of running the group. And so obviously the ladies of Alba Road on the committee, we have done that and we've been meeting for probably the last 6 months, I think. The next step is doing an initial evaluation of the neighborhood by our local fire agency, which was Stacy. So we did a walkthrough and I have a question for you about that that we can talk about further once we get into the Q&A. We're required to hold a community event, which today this event is meeting that criteria. And then before we submit, we need to do a community audit of things like how much vegetation have you removed from your property? And then in general for our community, what's the makeup in terms of the structures and terrain that make up Alba Road? And so that's in progress. We've done some surveying for some groups, like I hit up Jim's Road, and so we have some information, but probably over the next few weeks expect to get a survey that's super quick and easy, just asking you a little bit about your efforts on your property. And then the final step is us just having a strategic plan for what we want to do over the next 3 years. And we'll have that prioritized, and that's a collaborative effort between us, the Firewise Council, working with Chief Stacy, and then also we partner with the Fire Safe Council of Santa Cruz County as well before we submit. And so that's the final step. We plan to submit our application by the end of March. So we're getting towards the end of the process, and we're hoping that it will be accepted by a Firewise. All right, cool. Those are all the general updates I had. I just wanted to try to spend as much time as we could during the Q&A. So if we're ready, we can get started. I'm going to ask the Zoom folks first to see if anybody has any questions. And it looks like I can't see everybody. Let's see if I can extend it out further. If you want to just call out your question, if there's anybody on Zoom that has any questions for Chief Stacy, I'm going to go ahead and mute myself, and you can just chime in. Or if you're able to use the hands up, that's super helpful too. Okay, sounds like for right now, no questions on Zoom, which is totally fine. Any questions in person? Okay, so I'm going to go through the list. There are a couple people who submitted questions ahead of time. And so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so we can just see the chief as she's answering questions. Let me see if I can go into that. Right, let's see. Okay, Stacy, here's the first question that we had that was submitted beforehand. What is a new requirement for water tanks at each rebuild existing house? I've heard different versions, example, 5 gallons for existing or 10 gallons for rebuilds.
They're going to make everybody do 10,000.
Got it. Let's see. Next question. I'm just going to do a couple that are on the list and then I'll open it up again in case people have questions on the Zoom or in person. What would be your suggestion regarding how to leave our house next time if we have to evacuate? Example, should we turn all the power and water off? Should we add signs indicating how to turn systems off or on as necessary? Any best practices?
Well, it's just going to be about how much time you guys have. If you have, hours to spend, then yeah, go ahead and, like I've said, clear all furniture off your decks, anything that's flammable around, the property against the house, propane tanks that, are connected to barbecues, pull those off away from the house. If you can, shut your gas and your power off, not so much water, unless it's something that you're concerned that's inside the house, for a leak or possibly something like that. But we don't want you to shut down a water system that is to garden hoses or anything else to, water tanks that you have, because we rely on those quite a bit.
Very cool. Let's see. Okay, I did a couple questions off the preloaded. Let's see, I'll go to Zoom again. Any questions from folks on Zoom?
I have a question, Lindsay.
Okay, go ahead.
Just regarding the response on the, from the chief on the 10,000 gallon tank, is that for rebuilds or if existing properties are going to have to add?
No,
If they-
it's just for rebuilds.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Thank you. That answers that.
If you would like to put an extra tank on there, we wouldn't mind.
You're like, we'll take it as a perk. Let's see. Any other questions for the folks on that are on Zoom? Donald, want to go ahead? Looks like we can't hear you.
About, I would hope that the things that are being said right now that you're telling us, somehow that could go into a brochure that could be sent around, or that we could all get at the end of this whole process. Because I think every one of those things that you said I was wondering about when I evacuated.
I think if I heard your question right, it was a little hard for me to hear. I don't know if it was for everyone else, but I think you were talking about Stacy's answer to the evacuation best practices, having that on a pamphlet.
That's correct. Been getting brochures about safe zones around the property and so on. But the things that you're saying today, I haven't heard before. Like I didn't know whether I had to turn my propane off, leave it on, let it escape, just let it go out into the atmosphere, which I really don't want to for a lot of reasons. But those kinds of good advice from people on the ground that are watching a fire, I would really appreciate getting that kind of individual stuff.
Is there something like that exists already, Stacy?
There might be. We can look into that. So he wants something like a brochure on how to prep your house before you leave.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Either I can take notes right now, which I don't think will work out that well, but I think besides the people that are here, it would be good if we could just get that out to everybody in our area.
And have it on the internet.
Well, that's another issue. I don't know how many people are still in my category, being an Alba Road dinosaur, but I am not connected to the net at all. So it has to be word of mouth for me.
Yeah, I think our Firewise group can definitely do some physical printouts and stuff too. I know one thing that we were talking about was doing like a mailer to folks. And we might even be able to do like a packet of a bunch of different helpful pamphlets and checklists and things that we could send out to everybody.
And then I've also have put in 10,000 gallons in 2 tanks. And it feels to me like I should notify the fire department that those tanks exist. Because it's not a rebuild, but it's just something I put in for my own fire protection. So is there some kind of a consideration for that, that fire department can get a central region where, or some kind of a clearinghouse where information like that can be updated.
Were you able to hear that, Lindsay?
Yeah, so Stacy, it sounds like the question is if people have water tanks, is there somewhere with the fire department or county that they need to register that with so that?
Not so much. I mean, if you're putting them in yourself, and you haven't gotten a permit, then yeah, go ahead and call the fire department, and then we can add them into an app that we have that will put them on the map. So when we go into these areas, we can see how many, you know, who has a water tank and how much they have and stuff like that. If you've done it permitted, then it should show up on the GSI map that the county has.
Are there any repercussions if it was not permitted by disclosing that?
Not for us. So if you tell us, you're not, there's nothing. I mean, the county, of course, is, but we're not going to go to the county and say, hey, Joe over here put a 5,000 gallon tank illegally, because we don't really care. We're not the police. We'd rather have the water than not have the water.
Super helpful.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
This is Maggie. I live on Jim's Road, and the fire came 20 feet from my house, but we had cleared, so my house was fine. But 2 other structures burned. I only own an acre, and 2 of the properties that are on my borders are very lovely neighbors, but prior to the fire, they refused to clear. And I had asked them, I was like, this is not okay. And so I called after the fire, I called CAL FIRE, and I said, what can I do about my neighbors? Because now the forest behind me is burned. And if anybody tells me again, it can't burn again, my lid's gonna go off my head, because behind me could burn worse this time. It's dry and it's standing, and there's lots of duff that came off the trees. So my question is, how do we get our neighbors to clear? Because CAL FIRE told me that they can't require anybody to do it past 100 feet from a house.
And that's true. We can't, unfortunately, go in and make people clear their land. So it's just like hoarders. We can't, we've gotten so many people that, they hoard in their house, and you can't even walk into their house, and we can't do anything about it. And we know it's a death trap for us. It's a death trap for them, but there's nothing we can do.
I understand that, and I'm sympathetic. I know it's not you guys, but one of the structures that burned for me was a cabin, and my neighbors would not let my son clear around it because it was old and it went right up to the border. And if my son had cleared, because he was doing it all summer, that place wouldn't have burned. So my question is I just don't see, unless there's some other kind of somebody who can talk to people who just are not getting it. I know, but
we just, Boulder Creek just had a fire today, just a few hours ago, and somebody threw out their ashes from their fireplace on a hillside. Okay, so does that answer your question? There's going to be stupid people, and we can talk to them. We can send them nasty letters. We can, threaten them, everything. They're just not going to do it. They're not going to do it. And it's sad. So unfortunately, years ago, when we fought wildland fires, we would always go through neighborhoods and go, okay, that's a winner. These people have concentrated on their house. They've cleared it. They're good to go. We're going to protect that house because the neighbor next door, he hasn't done anything to his house. We're going to let that one go. So that was our theory. Well, now they have found that it's that neighbor who didn't do the work on their house. We're having to protect that one because it's such a fuel load and such a heat source for your house, who has, done a great job. We have to protect that piece of garbage now because he hasn't done anything, just to protect your house. And it's sad, but that's the new way now that we fight fire. Back then, it was, we let the piece of crap house go that didn't do anything, and we protect yours that's, you know, all good to go. But they found that that's not working, because that house that is full of, you know, debris and fire load is, you have to put that one out. You have to protect that one.
Okay, so do you know if you, I have an issue and I send people emails or certified letters or whatever, if an incident happens, are they then suable because they didn't pay attention to it and it happens?
I don't think so. If they started the fire, yes. If they started the fire, then yes, we can go after them and they're liable. But for them to be just negligent and not, you know, take care of their property, and if a wildland fire did go through their house, and unless there's some way you can prove that that house caused your house to catch on fire, I don't think that would be possible to go after them.
Do you think, this is all speculation, do you think that if we asked our legislature to make a heavier burden on people who are not firewise, do you think that would affect anything?
Oh yeah, because then they'd have, you know, Cal Fire right now they go out and they cite people for not doing, you know, clearing around the property. They have no repercussions for them at all.
I know. My neighbor's house who burned had one, and she didn't clear. And from that moment on, when I first got it, I did whatever they told me to.
Yeah.
You know, I don't. So, okay. So maybe that is the venue to go for my concern, is legislation. So
Yeah.
that you guys have something to work with, that you actually have teeth to whatever you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you for all your service.
So I have a question from the folks on site, and then Donald, I think I saw your hand up too. So I'm going to do this question really quick, and then I'm going to go to you. Okay. So the question that I have is a 3-parter. It's and it's all related, so I'm just going to ask it as one. Is a permit required for burning brush? What are the rules for a backyard burn, and how does the fire department feel about backyard burning?
So this is an interesting question, because back years ago, you used to be able to, anybody could burn on their property. Monterey Bay Air Pollution Control, probably about 10 years ago, came in and they took it out of the fire district's hand, the fire department's hand, and they said it's all about air quality now. So then they made a rule that anybody that had an acre of land or more, they could burn. So you would have to go through Monterey Bay Air Pollution Control to get a permit through them. And you do it every year, you get that permit. And then when you want to, they confirm the permit, then if you want to burn that day, you need to call in, I think, prior to that day, and they'll tell you if it's a burn day, and then they'll allow you to burn. They only allow 3 burns per fire district. So if you're, you know, the 4th one that called in to want to burn that day, you're out of luck. So the fire department, we don't really care if you burn or not, if you have an acre, if you have a half an acre. We just want to make sure that you're burning safely and you're following the rules. And all the rules are keep your piles under 4 feet, keep a really good clearing around those piles. You burn dry debris just to keep the, you know, air quality down and the smoke, and you have a water source near you. So we're not the police. We won't come out there, and if a neighbor calls you in and says, hey, you know, Joe's burning next door, we'll go out there. If it's a permitted burn day, you know, that CAL FIRE says, yes, it's a permitted burn day, we'll say, yep, pile looks good. You're doing a great job. I don't care if you have an acre, a half an acre, or whatever. I don't care if you're smoking your neighbor out, as long as it's not a nuisance to them and it's really, you know, obnoxious. And as long as it's safe, I don't care. Now, Monterey Bay, if that neighbor calls them air pollution control, they can come out, and if you don't have a permit and you're not, you know, supposed to be burning that day, they can fine you. So it's a fine line, and I'm working with Monterey Bay Air Pollution right now because we had an incident up off of Western, and some of the neighbors are concerned because they were burning legally but it was a windy day. So it wasn't windy as much as, and this is what it says under their rules, weather conditions, permitted. So if you think it's windy downtown in Ben Loma, and it might not be windy at Alba or something, or vice versa. So we'd have a hard time trying to explain that to people. You have to just know your conditions and make sure it wasn't, not a windy day that you're burning. I didn't feel that it was too windy for them to be burning. I think what happened is they just burned kind of in a wrong area. They burned at the base of a hill at the bottom, and they probably just didn't have proper clearing, and they weren't watching it properly like they should have. But hopefully that answers your question.
Donald, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Did you have another?
I don't, that really was enough.
He does not have a question.
Okay, let's see, there's a question in the chat that I'm just going to go ahead and ask too. What about clearing our roads? Does the Western Sweetwater area need to widen the clearance on our road?
Yes. And I met with, I can't remember her name. She lives off of Western, and we drove it, and there's some areas that not so much the road needs to be widened, but they're going to have to take some of the trees down that are sticking into the road. So the base of the tree is kind of hanging over and stuff like that. So we're going to have to do some work on that road.
Okay, let's see. Any other questions from the folks who are on site in person?
Anybody? Not at the moment.
Okay, and then anyone else on Zoom? Let's see. Okay, here's a question. How far from the ground up do the limbs need to be cleared on a tree?
So if it's not around a structure and everything, then probably if you can go, I mean, I don't think there's a requirement for that. I know there is around structures, but as far as you can get up off the ground without, destroying the tree, because that's the other thing. You don't want to cut too much off of these trees, and then you're destroying the tree also. So you have to be really careful. So I always tell people, if you're going to start cutting trees and limbing them up, to get somebody that's a good, that knows what they're doing. Just don't get somebody that's going to do a hack job on your tree, because then you're going to have another issue with in the wintertime or windstorms and stuff, and these trees die, and then you don't take them down, then you've got a dead tree, during wildland season.
There's one more question, which I think I can answer. So the question is, how much of Alba Road will be in the Firewise group? And I'll say that this question has been really hard for us on the council to figure out, because Alba, it's just a long stretch. Right now, what we're aiming for is probably something like a mile and a half up Alba to the top. But I'll say we haven't submitted our application yet. And one thing that I was going to put a call out to starting next week after this was just to see if we could get some folks who are towards the end of Alba that might be interested in participating, either like on our little council, or even just as sort of like a collaborator to represent the bottom of Alba. And mostly that's just because all of us are kind of like a mile and a half up. So we're just not as familiar with the bottom part of Alba, but I mean, my own vision is just having the entire road as part of it. But right now we're looking at, I think it's about like a half mile is when it would start, and then it would go up to the last house on Alba Road past Stoddard. Any other questions from the folks? Okay, and then any in person before I go to more canned questions?
We do. We're going to ask a question. Do you want to ask it her? What size and type of fittings do you want to see on the water tanks?
Well, I think they are, I'd have to look that up, 'cause I don't remember it right offhand. I think it's 2.5. I think it's a 2.5. And I was looking on one of the NFPA guidelines for the trees, it looks like trees 30 to 60 feet from the home should have at least a 12 feet between canopy tops. Trees 60 to 100 feet from the home should have at least 6 feet between the canopy top. So if that answers any questions on that tree, on the tree stuff. And then I can look up, while you ask me another question, I'll confirm on the water tanks.
So another question that came up, which maybe is like a little bit of an easier one, but it was, what are the top three things folks can do today to improve their home against wildfire risk?
Well, there's a lot. I mean, it would be better for me to actually look at everybody's houses and be able to let you know. But clearing all the way around, new construction now, they're going to require, I think it's 5 feet hard clearing all the way around where you don't have any vegetation whatsoever. And it's going to be down to, you know, rock around your house, concrete or bare earth. So it's going to end up being that. So that's going to be all new construction. So I'd err on that side of, if you really want to be that safe, then yes, clear 5 feet all the way around your house and rock it or concrete it or something like that. Your siding, look at your siding, fireproof that siding somehow. If it's, you know, a concrete board, some type, or stucco or anything like that. Your roof, make sure your roof is a comp roof, no wood shingles. Plastic gutters, get rid of all your plastic gutters, make sure they're metal gutters. There's tons. There's a ton. Wood decks, get rid of wood decks if you can. If you have exposed underneath all your wood decks and stuff like that, somehow close them in.
Maybe the high level advice would be to call the station and schedule
yeah.
a site view.
And then I can come out and look. We could be here all day.
Any other questions from the folks on Zoom? And then people in person?
No, we're good here.
Okay, the next question that I have was, can you share some high level thoughts on Alba Road overall? What are things that you think we could be working on as a community?
Well, I think the biggest part is trying to get your neighbors to clean up, you know, the land. I know a lot of that land along Alba is private property. So you're going to have, you know, issues with that. I know a lot of people up there own lots of acreage, so they're probably overwhelmed with the amount of work that they're going to need to do. So that's going to be an issue also. So it's going to be pretty hard, but I always tell everybody what they're doing on Graham Hill is what we want to see. So if you guys are driving Graham Hill and you see them all out there and they're clearing everything and all that debris and the bushes, you know, are being trimmed up and stuff like that, that's what we want to see. That's going to be good, you know, wildland safety for you guys.
Got a question from somebody on Zoom. Does the new growth at the bottom of the redwood tree since the CZU fire pose a hazard? Should this be cut while it's still small?
No, because it's green and it really doesn't burn. As long as you keep that dry, the dry duff and debris clear out all the, you know, the rings and stuff like that, the redwood rings, then they should be good.
Any other questions from the folks on Zoom? Another question in person?
Yep.
Okay.
Don, I feel like I'm in a dual conflict, and our mountains are in a conflict, and all the roads in conflict with the kinds of things that go on Graham Hill Road. because we're not flat. And when you get the upper part of Alba and you see how steep it is in terms of how that the free flow, it just goes slamming down towards 236. It looks like it go almost all the way to 236 in certain places. And you can see how bad it is now that the burn has taken place up there. And those of us that have lived through winters like 82 and seen whole mountainsides go down, I'm as worried about landslides and debris flows as I am about fire. And if we're coming here and we start absolutely clear cutting and we don't really take into account that every time we put a culvert in, start channeling that water and you have people living below you, they're as bad as the person that hasn't cleared off their debris or their fire load. And I don't want to see us on Alba get into a big panic in the sense of, or we think like we can have no fire load up there, no fuel load, at the expense of having no protection in terms of keeping this the land from starting to move. I think there's an angle of repose that we have in our hillsides that have been here for years and years, that the original slides took place, and we still see them taking place, like when they look like big slip outs, but they're actually slides taking place. When we come down the road, we see these, that angle of repose gets established, and then when we come in and do something as destructive as a fire that comes through, all of a sudden, one of the big things that helped anchor that and establish that angle was the trees, the vegetation, and things that would allow the water to soak in for a certain period of time until it finally gives way on the bedrock down below, 100 feet down. But those things that help to kind of hold things together have changed, and we have to take that into account. And I think there are a lot of people that don't take that into account. There are people that cut new driveways, put in new culverts, and as long as they get the water past their land, they feel like they're okay. They don't realize they've got a neighbor below them. In the same way that people that don't manage their fuel load don't appreciate they have neighbors around them. So I guess what I'm saying is I just want to put out a word of concern that I have when I have people talking about clear cutting and flat land and say, do that on Alba Road. Because Alba Road's not Graham Hill. I agree.
Yeah, and if you look at Graham Hill, they're not clear cutting. What they're doing is they're cleaning up the debris. So they're leaving the vegetation there, but they're cleaning all the stuff that's laying on the ground from that, like that bush that is spraying over onto the ground. They're trimming it up. They're leaving the root system there, but they're cleaning everything up on that. So I'm not saying clear cut anything, because I'm totally familiar with landslides up here in the San Lorenzo Valley. So my dad and I and everything lived through the 82 storm also. But what you need to do is, if you go out there and you look at the forest floor, it's filled with, dead bushes and dead trees and stuff. And I always tell everyone, you can leave the tree, the whole tree, but buck up all the dead limbs off of it and get rid of that. The bulk of the huge tree is fine. It's not going to burn. The fire is going to bump up to that and probably put itself out because it's too big to burn. But the dead, limbs on it, and it's all over, just piled high. Yeah, get rid of all of that. Anything that the manzanitas and all that stuff, they have all the dead, debris underneath it. Clean all that around it. Leave the bush, but just buck it up a little bit so it's not hanging on the ground and stuff like that, and get all the dead out of it. So they're not clear cutting it. They're just cleaning the floor up.
I was kind of visualizing the east side where they went in and took out, which was fine with me, but they went and took out all the acacia and pretty much started out that area. And I see the work that's going on over in the park, and yeah, I think they're doing a good job of lightening the load. And
and that's all I say. It's just, clean it up and get the dead out of there. You don't want to clear cut anything, because I'm totally familiar with that. And then on the water tanks, it is a 2.5. So it's a 4-inch riser and then it goes to a 2.5 connection for us. And if anybody is interested in that, just email me and I can send you all the specs on the water tank and configurations and stuff that we require when you do put a water tank in.
There's a couple questions in the Zoom chat that I'm gonna ask really quick. One question was, what about the Scotch broom growing along Alba? Fire risk? I think it's yes,
Yeah.
and it's invasive.
And it's Scotch broom, so.
Yeah.
think of it.
And then are there plans to improve the narrow lanes on Upper Alba Road, specifically the 1-lane areas, as this is an evacuation route?
Are there plans to? Aren't they working on it right now? Aren't they widening it right now?
No, they're repairing that slip out is the
They're
word.
repairing the slip out, but I think they're doing that. Aren't they gonna go back to a 2-lane? Or are they just repairing it?
I think this question is like the very top of Alba. So past Stoddard, it does become 1 lane. There's like a
Okay.
redwood that is cozy and it shrinks it down. Yeah, more towards Empire Grade.
Yeah, that's gonna be a county question with them then, because it's a county road. So they're gonna hopefully do some repairs, but you guys know how long it's taken them to even do the repairs on the part that fell. It's been years, so.
Any other questions from the folks in person?
Did you how do you keep broom and other low growing brush from growing in if you clear the forest floor like they are doing on Graham Hill?
What was that again?
How do you keep broom and other low growing brush from growing in if you clear cut the forest floor like they are doing on Graham Hill Road?
How do you keep it from not growing?
Correct.
Well, you just go out there constantly, keep cutting it down, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I think the point of my question is when you take away the native forest floor vegetation, you often end up with broom growing back in. And I just wondered if there's any ideas of how to keep the broom and things from replacing the vinca or the whatever, I guess that's not native, but the ferns and whatever you might have taken out.
Well, I don't think they're taking any native out. They're leaving all the native in. They're just cleaning it up. They haven't taken any of it out. Acacia, the acacia is not native to this.
Yeah, definitely
Yeah.
get rid of that stuff.
Yeah.
For allergies.
Any other questions from the folks on Zoom? Okay. This is another question pre-submitted. Is there anything that you can share regarding upcoming legislation from California around building and road requirements for rebuilds?
I can't right now because it's changing constantly and the fire code is in the process of changing this year. So in October, we will be adopting a new fire code, and what comes out of it, I don't know because it's in work in progress right now. Legislation, I know there's been talk about areas that have burned not being able to reburn if they are designated a high fire risk, which all of us are. If you lose your home, you may not ever be able to rebuild in this area. I've heard talk about that. I've heard talk about it's going to be extremely hard to rebuild, and that's why if anybody that's on right now has lost their home, I would do whatever you can to get your permits in right now before everything changes, because they're talking about if you lose your home in a wildland fire now, we can allow you guys to build to the standards that you built when you built your home years ago. But they're going to make, and I bet you after this fire code, they're going to make everybody come up to the current standards that are in place. So I'm telling everybody, just get your permits in, because it's going to be harder and harder, especially those people on Western. I mean, if we have to do current fire code, that whole road is gonna have to be totally addressed. And nobody's gonna have the money to address that road. They're gonna have to widen it. We're gonna have to put, turnouts in and everything, and it's gonna be a mess.
With that, I guess, if folks have their permits in already, like, is there a chance that this could be applied? They'll try to apply it retroactively?
I hope not, but it's, it could possibly happen. But you have more of a better chance if your permits are in and, you're breaking ground than if you're not, and then all of a sudden everything has changed and you try to go in and get your permits and they've changed it where you have to bring everything up to standard fire code. So.
And what's the legislative body that we would be writing to if we don't agree?
Well, there's Senator Laird. There's a bunch of them. So
We would just be going through like all of our elected officials. Okay.
yeah. There's Stone, there's a bunch of them. Bruce McPherson.
Let's see, another question on Zoom. What about the road widths for private roads? I have heard that will change.
That's probably going to change too. I think it's 15 right now, and I think they're going to try to change it to 20.
And would that apply, like if folks are already living there, like for us who our house is there, we're not rebuilding, it applies to everyone, or that's just for rebuilds, or how does that
Just
even
for
work?
rebuilds, just for rebuilds. So.
Any questions from folks in person?
I think it's just for new construction at this point. There's potential that it could be later for rebuilds, but my understanding is that new construction would require you to upgrade the roads to current standard, but rebuilds not.
Correct. But that's what they're trying to change right now is even if you are going to do a rebuild from a wildland fire, they're trying to change that where you have to come up to current standards. So that's why I'm telling everybody, just get your permits in as fast as you can.
So how much enforcement do you think will happen? I built my house with permits. I do everything with permits. I just put in a door with a permit. But a lot of people don't do anything with permits. So, but there's no enforcement. So like, unless the enforcement changes, people are just gonna do what they want. I've heard up in Boulder Creek, people are building without permits at all, up in the higher elevations.
And that's true. And there's a lot of homes that we lost in Ben Lomond and Boulder Creek that were not permitted. Those people are not allowed to rebuild. So they can rebuild up to current standards now, but they don't have that choice to rebuild to standards back in 1970 or 60 when they, supposedly built. So anything that's permitted and that was legal, we're allowing them to rebuild to the standards of when they built that home. But anything illegal, unfortunately, they have to start from, the beginning and build to the standards.
But my question is, it's not you. I know you're not here. I used to work for the county. I have a lot of regard for the county, but there is no enforcement at the county with building inspections of housing. People, every one of my neighbors has built unpermitted things. Every single one. I've not turned them in. I'm not interested in doing that. But this is a real issue because people are literally in Boulder Creek. I know people, I don't agree with them, who are building without permits now. They're just doing it because there is no ability to enforce. The county's not big enough. Nobody's big enough to run around and check it all. So that's not a criticism of you or expecting you to fix it. I'm just kind of like, I've lived up here since 79. And I'm just like, I just see the same issues over and over again. Flood, the earthquake, now the fire. And it's people think they can do whatever they want. And then when it goes wrong for them, they blame everybody else. Sorry for my frustration. I know it's not you.
Yeah, and like you said, we can't be everywhere and we can't personally enforce it. But if they do lose their house, you know, and they go to try to rebuild, if they're doing it illegally, again, that's their choice. I don't know how they're getting insurance on it. I mean, that's another question, how they would be getting insurance, because I don't know if, I would imagine it would need to be permitted to get any kind of loan or anything on it. And if they go to resell, stuff like that, it's got to affect them in one way or another, maybe not right this minute, but later on when they go try to resell that house, it's an unpermitted house. How is it going to sell, especially through the county when it's not even registered in the county? The county has a list of everybody's house that burned. They went out and before anybody was allowed to even get back in here, that's why it took so long. They had a crew of people going around to each and every parcel that burned and marked where they, you know, if they saw a mailbox, if they saw a chimney, a 2x4 sticking out, they found that there is a house there, and they know that there is a, you know, a house, whether it was permitted or not, they know that there is a house. So if somebody goes back in and builds a home right back in there, they have that on record that they never got permits and that home had already burned in the wildland fire, the CZU fire. So
Any other Zoom questions? Any other in-person questions?
I'd like to make a comment. One, I really appreciate this meeting, and I appreciate those of you who have taken the initiative to gather us together like this. And that's one of the things I really like about Alba Road. We get together when we have to, and we kind of stay apart, but we don't need to. But we help one another out. And the one thing I would like to just make the observation of is that there's a lot of people, maybe not so much on our road, but a lot of people in these mountains that are just trying to find a place to be, trying to find it. They've been burned out, and they want to have a roof over their head again. And if they can't get permitted, or if they haven't got the time, or if they haven't got the money, and they've lost their home, they're going to do what they have to do to build a shelter. And so, yeah, I think that the rules are really good, and in the long run, they have to be there. And in the long run, the new people that move in, they want to know that they've got a place that's legal. But I also have feelings for the people that are just trying to survive. And we all know what the housing shortage is and so on. And so I can understand why the county is, you know, looking more and more at grandma units and that kind of stuff. And maybe there's a lot of people that are trying to get some shelter that just don't have time to deal with other things other than their immediate stuff that's going on. And it's just an observation, but it's in hard times. It's all not nice and easy right now. And everybody's trying to survive, and I'm kind of proud of it, because I think we're people that came up into these mountains because we knew, I mean, we've got disasters all the time going on. We pull together and we help one another out, and this is an example of that, of getting together and saying, okay, now what do we have to do so we get things as safe as we can, and we can get people in compliance. But it's all that we're trying to work for our community, and that's a good thing when your community is important to you, and we're all intertwined. We can't, the forest and the slopes, they pull us together. Whether we want to be an independent person living in a big high rise where we don't even know our neighbor's name, if we want that kind of life, we're not here. But if we're a person that wants to kind of be out there in nature and experiencing the beauty that is on this road, then we came here. And we're independent people, but we also help our friends out when we know that they need the help, because we like it when they help us out. And so I can't get on a high horse about one person or another. I'm just thankful to be here. And I'm thankful that there's pretty much a lot of like-minded people, because that makes us work. And that makes this road really a special road. I just want to make that observation because it was right what you did today. Thanks.
Thanks for that. There's one more question in the Zoom chat, and that's how is Ben Lomond Fire Department staffing right now overall?
It's pretty good. After the CZU fire, we got an influx of people that wanted to be volunteers and help, and we hired a bunch of them, and a lot of them got in and found out how much time and commitment it took, and they said, oh, this is not for us, and they left. But we ended up with probably a good core of firefighters now that are pretty dedicated. And they, like today, we were up with Boulder Creek helping them on a wildland fire. So it's a good balance between all 4 districts. We all back each other up. So I think we're all good.
Let's see. I guess the question is, do they go to an academy? I guess it would be helpful to know just like, what's the process if you wanted to become a volunteer firefighter?
If you want to become a volunteer firefighter and you don't want to make a career out of it and you just want to volunteer and help, then we put you in a in-house like academy. But most of these guys want a career out of it and they're young. So they go to an academy right now that CAL FIRE puts on. And it's once every year, and it's probably, I think, 4 or 5 months. And like today, Saturday, Sunday, they're in class all day. And then on Wednesday night, I think they do a night class. So they do that for, I think, 4 or 5 months. And then they have to become, most of them all become EMTs, which are emergency medical technicians for, you know, the medical end of it. And that's most important for us because 90% of our calls that we run are medicals. So.
Was there another question from anybody? Okay, I had one more. What options are there for folks who are struggling to remove vegetation from their property, either funding or their physical ability? Are there any county options or any other things?
You and I talked about this. No, but that would be another good thing. You talked about writing your legislation and stuff. Years ago, the dumps down here, they had a program that was, I think, during spring and fall, where there was a week long where you can dump all your vegetation for free. As much as you wanted, you can dump it. For some reason, they got away from that. And that would be a good question to Bruce McPherson, is where that went, what happened to it, and why isn't it available for us? Because I know I took yards and yards of, you know, yard waste to the dumps during spring and fall, and that was my big cleanup. Number one, it made me clean it because it was free and I can dump it for free. And number two, you didn't have to pay for that. And it is so expensive, I've heard, to dump yard waste now. It's crazy. So yeah, I would write Bruce and call him and say, hey, whatever happened to that program? But other than that, I don't know of any. And the Firewise, like I said, we looked into that. There's grants and stuff like that. If you do become a Firewise, there are grants that you guys can get to help that out.
Any other questions from folks on Zoom? How about anybody in person?
We're all set here.
So we're at the hour mark. So I was thinking, unless there are any other questions, I'm pretty much to the end of my pre-submitted list as well. I'll give one more holler just to see if there's anybody who has a burning final question now that they know that this is sort of the end. Anybody at all? Okay, cool.
And you guys can always call me, and if you need me to come to the house, I have no problem coming to your house to look around. I know I went to Lindsay's and a few others up there. I have no problem. So just call me and we can make an appointment and I can come up there and look around.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Chief.
No problem.
And thank you, fellow Alba Roadians, Alba Roadies, for joining. I hope you found this beneficial. And then I'm going to go ahead and, what's next for Firewise is the question. So what's next for Firewise after this meeting? We're going to start sending out just some surveys to the community just to gather more information about what kind of work you've done on your property. We're going to pull together our strategic plan for the next 3 years, and then we're going to put in our application. And then again, the hope is that we'll be applying by the end of March to be able to get our recognition from Firewise. And I think Santa Cruz County, I don't know if you know the number, Stacy. They've been sending out updates, but it's actually quite a few Firewise communities in Santa Cruz County.
It's growing. Yeah.
Zayante just got approved maybe yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah. So the numbers keep growing, and I hope that we'll be able to join them too. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you again, Chief. And then, yeah, I'll be posting this to Facebook, and then I'll put it on our special district website as well, so that it can be hosted somewhere. All right, cool. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.